Welcome to this course on Python for non-programmers. This course is for absolute beginners or the ones who are just starting their programming journey. In this course, you will be learning the basics of Python along with the real-life examples. We will gradually build the concepts step by step through short videos and a quick challenge to determine that you have truly grasped the concept that was just taught. At each stage, we will apply our learning by completing different projects. This will help you in relating the concepts and help you in applying these skills in your everyday work. And the best thing about this course is that this course is continuously being updated. We will be adding more advanced concepts. So we will start our journey by writing our very first line of code and finish with different projects. So if you are ready to learn the world's most popular programming language in a fun and exciting way, join me in my Python for non-programmers course. In this course, we will be using Google Colab notebook for our coding exercises. So you don't need to install anything on your machine. All you need is a web browser and an internet connection to follow along. To open Google Colab, just head on to google.com. Log on to your Google account and simply search Google Colab. Now click on the very first link. Here you can either open the existing notebook or create a new one. So we will be creating a new notebook and I will click on New Notebook. Here you can see that our notebook is opened. So I will just close these release notes. Now let's have a look at the different components of a notebook. Here you can see the name of the notebook. This untitled 0 is the name of our notebook and .ipynb is our extension. Below to it you will get all sorts of command menus. You can explore them one by one. Now if we look further below, we can see that we get two buttons, this plus code and plus text. Using this code and text buttons, you can add code blocks and text blocks, where you can write a piece of code and a heading or some sort of text to explain the code. Let's click on the add text. This will add a text block. Here you can write any piece of text or you can create a heading. So in order to create a heading, you have to write hash and then the name of your heading. Moreover, you can create subheadings too. You can write double hash, heading 1. Similarly, you can write triple hash, heading 2 and so on. So likewise, you can add n number of headings as per your requirements. So you just have to press Shift plus Enter and here you can see that different headings has been added. So likewise, you can add subheadings in your text explanations. Let's now click on Add Code. This will add a code block and here you can write a piece of code. So after writing a piece of code, you can run the cell either by clicking on this play button or you can hit Shift plus Enter. Either way works fine. But before running a piece of code, we need to connect our Google Colab notebook to a runtime. So as soon as you run the code block first time in a notebook, the notebook will try to connect to a runtime automatically, or we can connect using this connect button. So let's click on this connect button and we will wait for our notebook to connect to a compute backend, or we can say runtime. So here you can see that our notebook is connected to a runtime, or we can say Python 3 Google Compute Backend. We will write and run our very first line of Python code in the next lecture. The very first line of code that we can write in any programming language is the hello world. Before writing any piece of code, the very first thing we need to do is to connect our notebook to a runtime. So here we will click on this reconnect button and we will wait for the notebook to connect to Google Compute Backend. Here you can see that our notebook is connected to the runtime. Now here in the code block we will write print, and then here I will write hello world. Let's run the code block and see the results. Here you can see that we get hello world. Congratulations, we just wrote our very first line of code. Let's learn the fundamental building block of any programming language. So variables are containers for storing data values. Variables hold a piece of information that changes over time. In Python, there is no need to declare variable with any particular type. Instead, it can be changed even after a type has been set. A variable is created the moment we assign a value to it. Doesn't sound good, right? Let's try to understand through some examples. If you want to store water, what do you need? Some sort of container, maybe a glass or a water bottle. What if you have some vegetables? You need some sort of container to store it. That's good. What if you have some cash? You need a locker to store this, right? So you need some sort of containers to store these physical items. What if you want to store the volume of water, weight of vegetables, or the amount of cash? So you might take a pen and write it down on a piece of paper. Or you might write it down on the notes of your smartphone. Maybe you will write down this information in the spreadsheet on your computer. What if you want to supply this information to a programming language? You need a variable. Let's see how we can make a variable in Python. To make a variable, the very first thing we need is to provide a name of the variable. The name can be a single letter like X, maybe Y or Z. It may be in small case or in uppercase. It may be any name such as volume, weight, or it can be anything. It can be multiple words like volume of water, and there should be no space between the words. We can improve its readability by making the words camel case. So like we can write it like this, volume of water, or we can introduce an underscore between the words like volume of water. So we can also introduce underscores between them. So I prefer the second one, using underscore between the words. So we will make a variable that stores the volume of water we have in our glass. So here we will write the name of the variable volume of water. We'll put a space, then equal sign, then again we will put a space, and then we will write the value of the information which we want to supply to this variable. Let's say we have 1 liter of water. So here we will write 1. So volume of water equals 1. So we have successfully made our first variable volume of water and its value equals to 1. So we will add a code block. Let's now make another variable that stores the weight of vegetables we have in our basket. Here we will first write the name of the variable. So we will write the name of the variable as weight of vegetables, space, and then equal sign. And here let's say we have 5 kgs of vegetables. So we will write here 5. Let's make another variable that stores the amount of cash we have in our locker. So we will write here the name of the variable cash, space, equal sign, and here we will write the value. Let's say we have $1,000 cash. So we will write here 1000. Let's check whether the information we stored in these variables are stored or not. To check this, we will first run these code blocks. So we will first run the code block volume of water equal to 1. So here we have set the variable volume of water equals 1. So in order to run this code block, either we can press here on the run cell button, or we can press shift plus enter to run this code block. So we have successfully run this code block, volume of water equals to 1. So similarly, we will run these two code blocks also, weight of vegetables and cash equals to 1000. So here we have run all these three code blocks. Now we will add a new code block and print these variables to check whether the values are stored or not. So we will write here print volume of water. So we can either write the name of the variable or we can simply copy the variable name and paste it here. So we will run the code block and see the results. So here we can see that we get the value 1. Similarly, we will print the other two variables. So here we will write print and we will just copy the variable name, weight of vegetables, and we will also print the variable cash. So we will just copy it from here and provide the variable name here. Let's run the code block and see the results. So here we get the value 5 and 1000. So whenever you want to check what information a variable is holding, just print that variable. Well, did you remember the second point we have discussed earlier in this video? Variables hold a piece of information that changes over time. Didn't remember, right? Let's see it in action, what this means. So if you look at the variable cash, you have $1000 in your locker. But what if you start spending it? Let's say you have spent $100 from it. So now you are left with $900. To supply this information to Python, we will add a code block and update the variable. So we have cash equals 900. Let's run the code block and then we will print the variable. So here we will print the variable cash. And here you can see that we get the value 900. So here we can see that variables hold the information that changes over time. So earlier we had a cash of $1000 and now we have a cash of $900. So by now we have learned what variables is and how their values can change over time. Let's test our knowledge by introducing a quick challenge, and throughout the course we will be having some quick challenges to test whether you have grasped the concept or not. So whenever I give you a challenge, just hit pause the video and give it a try on your own. It's really going to help you in learning and make sure that you are understanding what I am saying and you are not just listening and following exactly what I am doing. So the challenge I have for you is I want you to make a variable called temperature and set it equal to the temperature of your surroundings. So it may be 28 degrees Celsius, 35 degrees Celsius or whatever it may be. So just hit pause and make the variable on your own. Hopefully this went well for you. Let's do it together. So I will just add a code block here and write the name of the variable temperature. Hit space, then equal sign, and then I will write 28. I will also add a print statement to check the value. Let's run the code block and see the results. Here you can see that we have the value 28. In the previous video, we have learned about the basics of variables, how we can create and change the values of a variable. But did you notice from our examples that we need a specific type of containers to store certain physical items? If you look at our examples, we need a glass or a bottle to store water. We need a basket to store vegetables. And we need a locker to keep cash. Can you even think of storing water into a locker or cash into a bottle? Probably not. This doesn't make sense. Similarly, there can be many different types of information that needs to be stored. It can be integers, maybe floats, some sort of text, maybe a date, time or temperature, a list of grocery items or a coupon code, which is a combination of alphabets and integers, and maybe any other form of information. To store and manage different forms of informations effectively, programming languages have a concept of data structures. For example, if you want to store integers, we have a data structure int. If we want to store information after the decimal points, we have floats. And if we need to store some text, we have strings. If we need to store a list of grocery items, we have a data structure called list. We will learn about these data structures one by one later in this course. But for now, in this video, we will learn about integers and floats. Int is basically a short for integers and float is for decimals. For example, if we look at the variables we just created in the previous video, like volume of water, weight of vegetables and cash, all are of type integers, as it is a whole number and there is no decimals associated with it. But what if we have 1.1 liter of water and 5.2 kg of vegetables? We can store this information using floats. So all we have to do is to just change the values to 1.1 and 5.2 and we are good to go. Moreover, these int and float values can be either positive or negative. Let's understand it through an example. Consider an extreme cold day when the temperature is minus 20 degrees Celsius. So we will create a variable temp equals minus 20. Now that makes sense. So we have these two types, int and floats. What we can do with them? One thing that we can surely do with them is to do some basic mathematical operations. We can do some sort of addition, subtraction, multiplication or division. Let's use these variables to do some basic mathematical operations. We will start with the print function and do some basic maths without using variables, and then we will gradually introduce variables in these mathematical operations. So I will add a new code block and I will write here print 1 plus 1. Let's run the cell and check the results. So we have the output as 2. So we all know that 1 plus 1 is 2. Okay, let's write print 18 by 2. And we have the result as 9. Let's write print 5 minus 3. And we have the result as 2. Now let's introduce a variable in this print statement. So here we will write print temp plus 5. Let's run the cell and see the results. So here we have minus 15. So if you look at the variable temperature, this temp, so previously it was 28, then we have changed the value to minus 20. And now we are adding minus 20 plus 5 here. So we get the value minus 15. Let's take another example. We will multiply the cash by 2. So here we will write print cash multiplied by 2. And here we get 1800. We can even do mathematical operations with two variables. Let's say we have variables a equals to 2 and b equals 3. Now let's print a multiplied by b. And here we get the value as 6. So 2 multiplied by 3 equals 6. So we have learned how different types of data structures are required to store and manage various types of information. Also, we have learned how we can perform basic mathematical operations with variables. Now it's time to test our knowledge. So let's have a quick challenge. In this challenge, I want you to create two variables. one that represents your age and the other that represents your height. And select the units in such a way that one can be represented as int and other can be represented as a float. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Now let's do it together. So for me, I will select the units for age as years and height as centimeters. Let's create the variables. So I will write here age equals 23 and height equals 170.4. Here you can see that the variable age is of type int and the variable height is of type float. So now we have learned about the two different number types, integers and floats. We are going to learn about a new type called strings. Strings are a way to represent text inside Python. Let's say you want to represent the name of your favorite color or the name of your favorite car. You need a variable of type string. So let's add a new code block and create a variable, say favorite car equals Seltos. And let's run the code. So here you can see that we get an error, as we know that the word Seltos is a text. But in order to recognize this word as a string by Python, we need to wrap this text either inside a single quotes or a double quote. So let's wrap this text inside a double quote and run the cell. Here you can see that the error gets vanished and everything works fine. Now let's print the variable. So we will write here print and then we will pass the variable name here and we will run the cell. Here we got the output as Seltos and we can see that there is no quotes around it. Basically the quotes are used by Python to understand that this piece of word inside the quotes should be treated as a string. Now let's add a new code block and we will try to use both single quotes and double quotes to represent a string. So let's create the variable description equals Kia is the leading car manufacturer. Here we will try to emphasize the word leading by wrapping it with single quotes. So let's wrap it with single quotes and run the cell. Here you can see that we get an error. So these single quotes can be misleading for Python, and in order to get rid of this, we need to insert a forward slash to tell Python not to consider these single quotes as the end of the string. So let's add the forward slash and run the code block. Here we can see that everything works just fine. So by now we have learned three different types: integers, floats and strings. To make sure you have learned the strings, let's have a quick challenge to test this. So in this challenge, I want you to put the name of your favorite car into a variable named car. So hit pause and create the variable. Hopefully this went well for you. Let's do it together. So I will just add a code block and create a variable named car. So I will write here car equals, and I will write the name of my favorite car, Creta, with the double quotes around it. So you can either use single quotes or double quotes as per your preference. In this video, we will learn how we can introduce variables inside a string. So here we have some variables from our previous videos which we have created. So let's now add a new code block and I will just add a string. So I will just write here print, put a double quotes, and then I will write we have 2 kg of vegetables and it is stored at -20 degree Celsius temperature. Now let's run the code block and see the results. So we have our string printed here. Let's now introduce some variables inside this string. So in order to add variables, let's make this a f string. So I will just copy this and add a letter f here just outside the double inverted commas. Now let's run our code block and see the results. So here we can see that it works just fine as the previous. So basically the purpose of f string is to help us introduce variables inside the string. So now let's introduce the variable weight of vegetables. So if we can look here, so we have the variable weight of vegetables. So I will just add the variable here. So we have 2 kg of vegetables. So I will add the variable weight of vegetables here inside the curly braces. Now let's run the code block and see the output. So here we can see that we have 5.2 kg of vegetables and it is stored at minus 20 degrees Celsius temperature. So if we look at our code, we can see that the value stored in this variable weight of vegetables is 5.2. So here you can see that the value of the variable weight of vegetables is 5.2. So this value is assigned here. So we have 5.2 kg of vegetables and it is stored at minus 20 degrees Celsius temperature. Now let's introduce another variable, temperature. So I will just copy this and then I will add a variable temperature here. So let's copy the name of the variable, temp, and I will just replace this minus 20 with this variable name inside the curly braces. Now let's run the code block and check the results. Here we can see that it works as expected. So in this way we can introduce variables inside a string. Now let's have a quick challenge to test our understanding. In this challenge, I want you to make a variable that describes the quality of vegetables. It may be good, bad or excellent. And you have to insert the variable quality of vegetables in the string. So hit pause and complete the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. So here we will create a new variable quality and set its value equal to good. And you can see that the variable is of type string. So we have to put this either inside single quotes or double quotes. So here we will use double quotes. Now we will add the variable to our f string inside the curly braces. So I will just copy this. So I will just add a line, quality is good, and so here I will add a variable quality inside the curly braces and let's run the code. So here you can see that we have successfully added a variable. So far we have learned 3 types. We have learned integers, floats and string. We will now learn 4th type, which is called Boolean. A Boolean is a way to represent a on or off situation, true or false situation, 0 or 1 situation, or we can say a yes or no situation. So it is basically the binary, which simply means that it either have a true or false or a 0 or 1 value. So you might be thinking that where this type of variable is being used. So basically this is used in a situation where we have to say whether this is on or off. So let's have an example. Let's say you have a car and you want to tell whether the ignition is on or off. So here we will make a variable ignition is on equals true. So the value for this variable can be either true or false, because either the ignition of the car is on or off. So if the ignition is on, we will write true, and if the ignition is off, we will write false. So here we just have to write true. If we place this word true inside double quotes or single quotes, then Python will treat this as a word true and not a Boolean value. So we just have to write true without any quotes. So at this point of time, you might be thinking where this is used practically. So this Boolean shows its potential when it is used with an if statement. With an if statement, we can make certain decisions based on the value of the Boolean, whether this is on or off. Let's try to understand it through an example. So let's say you have to design a central locking system for a car manufacturer. You are told by the manufacturer that when the ignition of the car is on, the doors should be auto-locked, and when the ignition is off, the doors will be open. So let's first try to add the very first functionality, that is when the ignition is on, the doors will be locked. So we will first add the if statement. Here I will write if ignition is on, then I will place a semicolon here and then press enter. So here you can see that we have a indentation. This indentation is required in Python to indicate that a code is a part of this if statement. So if we are using an editor, this indentation is automatically placed. So here we will write print doors are locked. So here we have the ignition is on equals to true. Let's run the code. Here we can see that we got the message doors are locked. So we have successfully developed the first functionality. Now let's change the value to false and rerun the code. Now let's change the value to false and rerun the code. So here you can see that we get nothing. So to add the second functionality, we will need an else statement. But before that, let's test our understanding of if statement through a quick challenge. So as a challenge, I want you to display a message, have a safe and comfortable journey when the ignition is on and after the statement, doors are locked. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. So what I will do is that I will add a new line after the print statement. So I will just copy this. So I will just hit enter and add a new statement here, print, and then I will write have a safe and comfortable journey. So I will just make this value ignition is on equals to true, run this cell, and now let's run the code block and see the results. Here we can see that the output contains the doors are locked and have a safe and comfortable journey. So far we have learned how we can use the if statement. But what if we want to accomplish certain thing when the Boolean is set to false? In order to do that, we have an else statement. So let's learn the use of else statement through an example. So let's recall the previous example where a car manufacturer wants us to design a central locking system. So previously using the if statement, we have accomplished the first objective. So when the ignition is on, doors are locked. Now it's time to accomplish the second objective. So when the ignition is off, door locks needs to be opened. In order to do this, let us first change the Boolean ignition is on to false and we will run the cell. Now let's copy this code and I will paste it here and then we will run the cell. So here you can see that we get nothing as expected. Now let's add the else statement. So here we will write else we will put a semicolon here and then we will press enter. And here we will add a print statement. So I will write here print and then I will write door locks are opened. So here we need to make sure that no space is left before the else and we need to add an indentation before the print statement. Now let's run the code block and see the results. So here we can see that we get the result door locks are open when the ignition is off. One interesting thing to note here about Boolean is that any comparison we made, it may be between two numbers or two string, returns a Boolean value, which means it will either return a true or false. Let us try to understand it through an example. So let's compare two numbers. So in this code block, I will simply write here 2 less than 1 and let's run the code block. So here we get the value false. Now let's write 3 less than 5 here and let's run the code block. So here we get the Boolean true. So let's add another code block and compare two strings. So here I will write light and then I will add a comparison operator here equals and then electricity. Let's run the code block and see the results. So here we can see that we get the value false as expected because we all know that the string light is not the same as the string electricity. So now we have learned the Booleans and how it can be used with if and else statements to do some great things. Now it's time to test our understanding through a quick challenge. So let's have a challenge. In this challenge, I want you to make a variable mileage and set a value. So using this variable, I want you to print the mileage is good in case the mileage is greater than or equals to 18 kmpl and the mileage is bad in case the mileage is less than 18 kmpl. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Let's do it together. So what I will do is that I will add a code block and create a variable mileage. So I will create a variable here mileage equals and I will add a value 20. Now I will add an if statement. So I will write if. So I will just copy the variable name from here mileage. So if mileage is greater than or equals to 18. So I will place a semicolon here and then hit enter. So if the mileage is greater than or equal to 18 kmpl, I will add a print statement here print mileage is good. Now let's add a else statement. So I will write here else, place a semicolon, hit enter and then I will print mileage is bad for all the values which are less than 18 kmpl. So I will write here mileage is bad. So let's run the code block and see the results. So here we can see that we get the string as mileage is good. So let's change the variable mileage to 16 and then rerun the code blocks. So here we can see that we get the value mileage is bad as the mileage is less than 18 kmpl. So far in this chapter we have learned the concept of variables, the types such as integers, floats, strings and booleans. Moreover, we have learned the concept of using if and else statements. Now it's time to test our knowledge through a chapter quiz. So let's meet in the chapter quiz. Good luck. Well, this is an exciting journey for us. We have just completed a whole section and we have learned some of the basics of Python such as variables, its types such as integers, floats, strings and booleans. And we also learned the use of if and else statements. Now it's a great time to apply these things that we have learned through a project. Because if we don't build any project, there is no point of learning Python. So we will be building a lucky draw project. In this project, we will bring all the things together that we have learned so far. In our project, we will be conducting a lucky draw in which the player wins a prize according to the number he gets from 1 to 4. So you can think of it as a bunch of 4 identical chits containing any number between 1 and 4. So if the player gets the number 1, he wins a car. If he gets a number 2, he wins a bike. If he gets a number 3, he wins a cycle. And if he gets a number 4, we will display a message, better luck next time. So before jumping on to the project, I would like to introduce you through the concept of randomness. So here we will be learning how we can introduce the concept of random numbers in our Lucky Draw project. In order to use random numbers in the Python, we need to import a random module. So basically a module is just a piece of code that someone else has written, and we can use that code just by importing that module. So we will just import the random module. So I will just write import random. This will import the random module in our workplace. Python has lots of modules, but we don't need them all the time. So we can import them as per our requirements. To use the random module, I will just write here random dot rand int, and then I will add 1, 4. So this will return a random number between 1 and 4. Random module has lots of functions. If you want to know about the random module, just search on Google random module in Python. So here you will get lots of resources. So my favorite one is W3 Schools. So I will just open this. So here you can see there is a whole bunch of functions which the random module offers. So this way you can learn about any module which a Python offers when the need arises. So you just have to simply search the name of the module on the Google and you will get a whole bunch of resources. So in this you need to provide two numbers, the minimum and the maximum. And this gives a random number between 1 and 4. So every time you run this function, it will generate a different number between the range we have provided, the minimum value and the maximum value. Now we can use these random numbers in our code. Another thing that we can do with random module is that we can generate random floats. In order to do this, I will just write random dot random and I will just run the cell. So this will give a random floating number between 0 and 1. So you can see every time we run the code, we get a different floating number. So these are just the few things that you can do with the random module. You can explore more from the online resources and have some experimentation with the random module. Now that we have learned how to use the random module and get some randomness, it's time to jump onto our project Lucky Draw. So previously we have introduced our project. As you know, we will be conducting a lucky draw in which the player wins a prize according to the number he gets from 1 to 4. So you can think of it as a bunch of 4 identical chits containing any number between 1 and 4. So if the player gets the number 1, he wins a car. If he gets the number 2, he wins a bike. And if he gets a number 3, he wins a cycle. And if he gets number 4, we will display a message, better luck next time. So now let's actually start working on this project. Before going any further, I want you to take this as a challenge and I want you to build this project. There is one hint for you. You just need to use the random module we just introduced and the if statements. That's all. So just hit pause and give it a try. Hopefully this went well for you. Now let's build this project together. So I will just add a code block and import the random module. So I will just write import random. Now I will make a variable lucky number equals random dot rand int, and then here I will provide the values, the minimum value and the maximum value. So I will write here 1, 4. So as the project says, we need to make chits between the numbers 1 and 4. So this thing can be achieved by creating a variable and assigning it a random number between 1 and 4. So that every time we run the code, it gives a different number. So I will just make a variable lucky number equals random dot randint, and here I will provide the minimum and maximum value. So I will write here 1, 4. Now the next step is to frame the if statement. So I will write here if lucky number is 1, then I will add a semicolon here, and then I will print congratulations, you won a car. Now let's add the if statements for the other prizes. So I will write here if lucky number is 2, then I will print congratulations, you won a bike. Similarly, I will add the if statements for the other two numbers. So I will just copy this, and then I will change the number to 3 here, and I will print here congratulations, you won a cycle. And similarly, I will add the if statement for the number 4, and here I will print better luck next time. So here I will just add this variable lucky draw to this code block, so that every time we run this code block, this lucky number gets changed. So we have written all the if statements and we have make a variable. Now let's run the code and see the results. So here you can see that we get the lucky number as 3. So we get a message, congratulations, you won a cycle. So let's run this cell again, and here you can see that we get the lucky number as 1 and we get a message, congratulations, you won a car. So let's run this code block again, and this time we get the number 4 and we get a message, better luck next time. But congratulations, you have just completed your first project. In this project, we have made a fun game and learned a new concept. We have learned to introduce some randomness in our Python code. So good luck, we will meet in the next section. Now that you have finished your first Python project, you have got a good idea about the flow of this course. That first we will learn some concepts and apply those concepts in a project. Now it's time to learn new concepts and get prepared for our next project. So now we will be learning about lists. Lists is basically a new type and in Python which is specifically designed to contain an ordered list of information. So it may be a list of integers, maybe a list of floats, list of strings, or maybe their combination. Some examples might be a list of your favorite cars or your favorite players. It might be anything. One thing we need to remember about list is that they have a certain order. Let's understand the lists through an example. So I will add a new code block and make our very first list. To make a list, we just have to provide the name of the list. So I will write here our list, then the equal sign, and we have to provide our items inside the square brackets. So I will add square brackets and then write 1, 2, 3 and 4. So here you can see our list equals 1, 2, 3 and 4. Similarly, we can make a list of floats. So here we can write 3.5, 8.2 and so on. So this list contains some floats as well as some integers. Now let's see how our list looks like. So I will just add the print statement. So I will write here print and then pass the name of our list. Let's run the cell and see the results. So here you can see that we have our list printed. Also, we can add some strings in our list. So I will write here pencil. So here pencil is a string. Let's run the cell and see the results. So here you can see that our list gets printed. One thing we need to remember is that these lists are an ordered collection of items. So what does this mean? Let's try to understand it through our list. For any list we have indexing, and that indexing starts from 0. So the number 1 is at index 0, 2 is at index 1, 3 is at index 2, 4 is at index 3, and so on. Let's test this using the print statement. So let's print the item at index 5. So I will just add a square bracket here and then write the index. Let's run the cell and see the results. So here you can see that we have 8.2. Also we can count it from here 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So at index 5 we have 8.2. Similarly, we can print the item at index 6. So I will just change it to 6 and then run the cell. So here you can see that our string gets printed. Now let's print the item at index 0. So I will just write it here 0 and run the cell. So here you can see that our integer 1 gets printed here. Moreover, we can calculate the length of the list by using the length function. It basically gives the total number of items that a list contains. So here I will add a print statement and I will write here the name of the function length, and then inside the function I will write the name of the list. Let's run the cell and see the results. So here we get 7. So our list contains a total of 7 items. So now we have learned a new concept called list. It's time to test our knowledge through a quick challenge. In this challenge, I want you to create a list of your favorite cars and print the name of the car at index 2. So hit pause and make a list. Hopefully this went well for you. So let's make the list. So I will just add a code block and then I will give the name of the list as car, then the equal sign and then square brackets, and here I will write the name of my favorite cars. So here I will write Glenza, Duster, Creta and Seltos. Now I will write the print statement. So I will write here print and then the name of the list car, and here I will provide the index 2. Let's run the cell and see the results. Here we got the name of the car at index 2. By now we have learned the concept of list and we have learned how we can create a new list. What if we want to add or delete certain items from a list or insert an item at a particular index in a list? In this video we will learn how to add, insert or delete certain items from a list. So let's start by adding a new item in the list we just created. So to add a new item, we just have to write the name of the list. So here the name of our list is car dot append, and then inside the close parenthesis I will write Harrier. Now let's run the cell and the new item has been added to our list. To check whether this works or not, let's check the length and print the list. So I will write here print length and the name of list. Also I will print the list. Let's run the cell and see the results. Here we can see that item has been added at the index 5. Now let's say we want to add an item but not at the end. Instead we want to add an item at a specific index. Let's say at index 2 or index 3. This can be done with the help of insert. Let's see how. So I will write here car dot insert. Now here we have to first provide the index at which we want to insert the item. So here I will provide the index 2 and then add comma and provide the item. So here I will provide Safari. Now let's run this and print our list to see the results. So let's add the print statement. Let's run the cell and see the results. Here we can see that our item Safari has been inserted at the index 2. So insert allows us to add an item at a specific place instead of always adding it at the end. What if we want to delete a certain item, let's say the item at index 0. To do this, we just have to write the name of the list, provide the index of the item which we want to delete, and we have to wrap the whole text inside the del. So we will wrap this whole text inside del. Now let's run the cell. So this will delete the item at the index 0. Now let's print out the list and see the results. So print. Let's run the cell and see the results. So here we can see that the item at the index 0 has been deleted. So by now we have learned how to add, insert or delete certain items from a list. It's time to test our understanding through a quick challenge. In this challenge, I want you to keep only the favorite car in your list and delete the rest of them. Let's say the car Seltos is your favorite one. Now hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Now let's do it together. So I will print the list and check the index of our favorite car. So here we can see that the index of our favorite car is 0, 1, 2 and 3. So what I am going to do first is that I will delete the item at the index 0, 1, 2 and 3 times, so that the items before the index 3 or the item before our favorite car gets deleted. So I will just write del car and then I will provide the index 0, and here I will run this cell 3 times. So 1, 2 and 3. Now let's print the list and see the results. So here we can see that all the items before the index 3 has been deleted. Now we have to delete the item after Seltos, which is now currently at index 1. So I will write del car 1. Now let's run the cell and print the list. Now you can see that all the items except our favorite car has been deleted from the list. In this video about for loops, you will understand the true power of programming. A for loop in Python allows us to execute the same piece of code again and again. So let's create our first loop and see how it works and looks like. So I will just write for value in range 5. And then I will print loop is running. Now let's run the code first and see what's happening without going into details. So here you can see that the text loop is running gets printed 5 times. You can change the value in range to 50 instead of 5, or you can change it to 5000 or any number, and the loop will execute the code that many times. Now let's go in some details of this for loop. So starting with the for, then we have to provide the name of the variable. The name of the variable can be anything. It may be x, y or any other name as per your likings. And then we have to provide the keyword in and a list to loop through. So basically a range is a function that creates a sequence of numbers. Like if we write range 5, it will create a sequence of 5 numbers starting from 0 to 4. It's interesting to note that here also the counting starts from 0. Then we have to provide a semicolon here, and then after the semicolon we will press enter. And in the second line we have to provide some indentation. So here we will keep the defaults one. These indentations allows us to write our code inside the for loop. So here we can write any piece of code and the code will be executed as many times the value we provided in the range function. Let's try to understand it through an example. Let's check what the variable value contains by printing it inside a loop. So here I will change this to value and run the cell. So here we get 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. This confirms that the counting starts from 0. What else we can do? We can just multiply the value by 2 and print it. So here I will multiply this value by 2 and run the cell. So here we can see that we get the values 0, 2, 4, 6 and 8. And also we can change the range 5 to 50. And let's run the cell. So here you can see that how fast it is. This is the thing where computers are really good at. And also there is a good connection between for loop and lists. So instead of providing a range function to create a sequence of numbers, we can provide a list to loop through. This means that it will loop through all the items inside a list. Let's try to understand it through an example. So let's take our car list and place it inside a loop. So I will just write for name in car, then I will place a semicolon here and then print name. Let's run the cell and see the results. It prints the name of the car inside the list. How nice is that? Now that you have learned the concept of for loop, it's time to have a quick challenge. In this challenge, I want you to make a for loop that loops through a range of 5 and you have to append each number between 0 and 4 to your car list. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Let's do it together. So I will just write for number in range 5, place a semicolon here and then I will press enter. So here I will write car dot append and then I will write number. Let's run the code and print the car list. Now I will add a print statement here. Print car. So here you can see that the number gets added to our car list. Now we are going to start learning about dictionaries. So dictionaries are very similar to lists, or you can say a list of key value pairs. Now what are key value pairs? You can think of it as a physical dictionary in which we have a key of words, and when we open up the particular page corresponding to the key, we get its definition. Let's see how a dictionary in Python looks like. So let's extend our car list and make it a dictionary. So we will make a dictionary in which we are having the car brand name as the key and car model name as the value. So here I will just write car dict equals to, now we have to provide a curly braces, press enter. Now here we have to provide key value pairs. So first we have to provide the key. So here I will write Toyota. Then we have to provide a colon and then we have to provide the name of the value. So here I will write Glenza. Now I will add a comma and add the second item of the dictionary. So in the second item I will write the key as Renault. So here the key is the car brand name and the value is the model name of the car. So here I will write Duster. Now I will add the third item of the dictionary. So here I will write the key value as Hyundai and the value as Creta. And I will add the fourth item of the dictionary as Kia Seltos. Now let's print the dictionary and see the results. So I will just run the code block and add a print statement here. Print car dict. Let's run the cell and see the results. Here we can see the dictionary. It looks very similar to what we have created just now. What if we want to print the model name of the brand Toyota? To do this, we just have to print the dictionary and supply the key whose value we want to print. So here I will write print, then write the name of the dictionary. So here it is car dict, and inside the dictionary we have to provide the name of the key. So here I will write Toyota. Let's run the cell and see the results. So here we get the model name Lanza. What if we want to add another item? To add another item, we just have to write the name of the dictionary, provide the key and the value. So I will write car dict. Here we have to provide the key. So here I will write Tata, then place a equal sign and provide the value here. So I will write here Harrier. Let's run the cell and print the dictionary. So I will write print car dict. Let's run the code block and see the results. So here we can see that a new item has been added to our dictionary. What if we want to delete the certain item? To do this, we just have to wrap the dictionary inside the delete function and provide the key for which we want to delete. So here I will write del function, provide the name of the dictionary, car dict, and here we have to supply the key. So here let's say I will write Kia. Let's run the cell and print the dictionary. So here we can see that the item has been deleted. Now that we have learned how to create dictionaries, add and delete certain items, it's time to have a quick challenge. In this challenge, I want you to keep only the favorite item in the dictionary and delete the rest of them. Let's say Tata is your favorite one. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Now let's do it together. So here I will write del name of the dictionary, and then I will provide the key as Toyota. Now I will add another del statement. I will write car dict and provide the name of the key as Renault. And I will add another del statement and I will write car dict and provide the key as Hyundai. Now let's run the code block and print the dictionary. So here I will add a print statement, print car dict. So here you can see that all the items except our favorite one gets deleted. Well, this is an exciting journey for us. We have completed our second section and we have learned the concept of lists, how to add, insert or delete items of a list. Moreover, we have learned the concepts of dictionaries and for loops. Now it's time to apply the things that we have learned through a project. So let's say a car manufacturer approached you to build a safety algorithm that tracks through a checklist and makes sure that the checkpoints are respected before the car can be put into ignition mode. He wants you to keep a track on gear position, whether the doors are closed or open, driver has fastened the seat belt or not. Moreover, he wants to keep a check on tire pressure, fuel level and oil level of the car before the driver can put the car into ignition mode. The algorithm should make sure that the gear is in neutral position, doors are locked, driver has fastened the seat belt, tire pressure is in the range of 25 to 35 psi, fuel level should be more than 10% of the tank capacity and oil level should be more than 15% of the tank capacity. The tank capacity of the car model is 30 liter and the oil tank is of 2 liter. Also, the car manufacturer doesn't want to make a compulsion on the seatbelt for the driver. Instead, he wants to display a caution message on the car dashboard. And for rest of the checkpoints, he wants to display a message and prevents the car from going into ignition mode. For example, if the fuel level is less than 10%, the algorithm should display the message, "Your fuel level is very low, please refill the fuel tank," and prevents the car from going into ignition mode. Likewise, the algorithm should check for the safe ranges of fuel level, oil level, and tire pressure and displays similar message and make sure that the doors are closed and the gear is in neutral position. So let's now actually start working on this project. Before going any further, I want you to take this as a challenge and I want you to build this project. There is one hint for you. Just make a list of the checkpoints and you can store the safe ranges of the checkpoints in a dictionary and then use the for loop to loop through all the checkpoints. So hit pause and build the project. Hopefully this went well for you. Let's do it together. The very first thing we will do is to make the checkpoints that stores the values of the checkpoints. So we have a total of 6 checkpoints, so we need 6 variables to store their values. Let's make the variables. If you look at the checkpoints, these 3 checkpoints have a value of either yes or no, which means that either the gear is in neutral position or not, either the seat belt is fastened or not, and the doors can be either closed or open. So these 3 checkpoints can have the Boolean values, means either it is true or false. Let's look at the other 3 checkpoints. If you look at the fuel volume, oil volume and tire pressure, these values can be of floating type. So here we have 2 sets of variables. One is of Boolean type and the other is of floating type. Apart from these variables, we need 2 more variables to track the fuel level and oil level in terms of percentage. So we have a total of 8 variables. Let's create the variables. So we will create our very first variable to track the gear position. So here I will add a variable is neutral and set its value equals to true. Similarly, we will create the other 2 Boolean variables. Let's create a variable to track seatbelt status. So here I will write is seatbelt fastened and set its value equal to true. Similarly, let's create a variable to track door closure status. So here I will write is doors closed and set its value equal to true. So we have created the variables to store the Boolean values. Let's now create the variables to store the floating point values. So let's create a variable to track the available fuel in the tank. So here I will write available fuel and I will set its value equals to 25. Similarly, let's create a variable to track the available oil in the oil tank. So here I will write available oil equals to 1.5. Let's now create a variable to track the tire pressure. So here I will write tire pressure equals 30. So we have created the variables to track the available volume of fuel, oil and tire pressure. Let's now create the variables to track the level of fuel and oil in the tank in terms of percentage. So here I will create a variable fuel level equals available fuel divided by 30 and multiplied by 100, and oil level equals available oil divided by 2 multiplied by 100. So we have created all the variables to track our checkpoints. Let's now create a dictionary to store the safe ranges of tire pressure, oil level and fuel level as recommended by the manufacturer. So we will make a dictionary and let's give it a name safe range equals. So here I will first add the tire pressure. So here I will write the key as the tire pressure and in the values we will provide a list that contains the minimum and maximum value of the safe range for the tire pressure. So here in the value I will provide a range. So here I will write 25, 35. Similarly, we will create a key value pair for the fuel level and oil level. So here I will write fuel level as the key and will provide a list that contains the minimum level as 10% and maximum level as 100%. And for the oil level, we will write the key as oil level and will provide a list that contains the minimum level as 15% and maximum level as 100%. So now we have created the dictionary to store the safe ranges. The next thing we can do is to make a list of safety checkpoints. So it becomes easier to loop through using a for loop. So let's make a list. So I will write here checkpoints list equals. So I will add the name of the variables here. So here in this list, I will add the name of the checkpoints. So these are the variables which we have created. So here I will add is doors closed, then is neutral, fuel level, oil level, tire pressure, and is seat belt fastened. So now we have made a list of our 6 checkpoints. It's now time to make a for loop that loops through all the checkpoints. So let's make a for loop. So here I will write for and let's provide the variable name as checkpoint and write the keyword in, and here we will provide the list through which we have to loop through. So I will provide the checkpoints list, add a colon and press enter. Now let's first check whether the doors are closed or open. In order to check this, we will use an if statement. So here we will write if is doors closed, then a semicolon and press enter. By default, the value it takes is true value. So if the doors are closed, then we will do nothing and we will just make our loop to go to the next checkpoint. In order to move to the next checkpoint, in case the doors are closed, we will use the keyword pass here. Now what if the doors are open? In this case, we have to give a message to the driver to close the doors and we have to prevent the car from going into ignition mode. To accomplish this, we will use an else statement. So here we will add an else statement and we will print the message. Please close the doors and we will terminate the loop using the break statement. We will now check whether the gear is in neutral position or not. To do this, we will write the if statement. So here we will write if, then the variable name is neutral, press a semicolon and hit enter. So similarly, as we did for the doors closure status, we will just pass our loop to the next checkpoint if the gear is in neutral position. So we will write here the keyword pass. And if this is not the case, we will add an else statement and provide a message to the driver. Please place the gear in neutral position and we will terminate the loop using the break statement. Next, we will check if the fuel level is in safe range, or we can say it is more than 10%. To do this, we will add an if statement here and we will write the name of the variable, fuel level, and then we will check the fuel level using a condition here. So here we will give a condition greater than or equals to. Now we need to provide a value from which we need to compare. So as we know, fuel level should be more than 10% in order to be in the safe range. So we can either write 10 here, or we can provide the value from our dictionary which contains the values of the safe ranges. Here we will provide the value from our dictionary. So we will first write the name of the dictionary, safe range, and then we will provide the key from which we need to extract the value. So here I will provide the name of the key. So here I will write fuel level. Now we know that the value 10 is stored in a list. So if you just add a code block and check what this piece of code contains. So I will just write here safe range, and here I will provide the name of the key. So here I will write fuel level. Let's run the cell and see what this piece of code contains. So here we can see that it contains a list. Now in order to extract the value from a list, we need to provide the index where the value is placed. So here the value 10 is placed at index 0. So now we will add a square box and provide the index. Now let's run the code block and see the results. So here we get the value 10. So now here we will provide the index, place a semicolon and press enter. Here we will do the same as we did for the previous checkpoints. So we will just pass our loop to the next checkpoint if the fuel level is more than 10%. And if this is not the case, then we will add an else statement, and we will provide a message to the driver that your fuel level is very low. Now please refill the tank. And we will terminate the loop using the break statement. Now we will provide a similar if and else statement to check for the oil level. So here I will just copy the if statement and replace the fuel level with the oil level. And here in the safe range also I will replace it with the oil level. And here in the print statement I will change this to oil. Similarly, we will provide a if and else statement to check for the tire pressure. So we will write here if, then the variable name tire pressure, and then we will provide the condition to check. So here you can see that we have two conditions. The tire pressure should be more than 25 psi and it should be less than 35 psi. To check for both the conditions, we will use the AND keyword. So here I will write the tire pressure should be greater than safe range tire pressure. So it should be greater than 25. And for the next condition, we will use a keyword AND here, and then we will provide tire pressure should be less than safe range tire pressure 1. So here we have written if tire pressure is greater than 25 and tire pressure is less than 35, then we will pass on to the next checkpoint. And if this is not the case, means that the tire pressure is outside this range. To account for this, we will add an else statement and provide a message. Please check the tire pressure. And we will terminate the loop using the break statement. Let's now check for our last checkpoint, that is for the seat belt. So let's add an if and else statement. So here I will write if, then the variable name is seatbelt fastened. Since this is a Boolean variable, so we will just add a semicolon, and because the value is true by default, let's press enter and add the message ignition is on and have a safe and comfortable journey. And break the loop. Now let's add the else statement to account for the case if the seatbelt is not fastened. As this is not a compulsion made by the manufacturer, so we will just provide a warning message and allow the car to go into the ignition mode. So we will add a else statement and add a message. Ignition is on. Please fasten your seat belt. And then we will break the loop. So we have now made our for loop covering all the checkpoints. Let's now run the code and see the results. So here we get the message ignition is on, have a safe and comfortable journey. Let's make the variable is neutral to false. And let's run the code. So here you can see that we got the message, please place the gear in neutral position. Okay, now let's make all the variables within the safe limits. So I will just change it to true and run the code. Here you can see that we get the message ignition is on, have a safe and comfortable journey. Congratulations, we just finished our second project, and you can have a play around by tweaking the values of the variables and see the results. And it's possible that you might come up with a different approach for this solution. And that is completely correct, and every programmer can have a different approach and conceptualize in a different way. I would encourage you to post your solution in the Q&A section, and I am happy to see your solution. Also, you might be thinking that instead of looping through all the checkpoints and providing a message and preventing the car from going into ignition mode, what if we can go through all the checkpoints and prompt the driver to take some action, fulfill the requirements, and then allow him to put the car into ignition mode? Well, this paves our way to the next section, in which we will learn about functions and how we can take inputs from the user. So let's meet in the next section. Good luck. Congratulations, you have now completed your second Python project, and we are back to learn new concepts. We will be preparing for the third project of this course. So let's learn the skills in order to do that. So in this video, we will be learning about functions. Functions are basically a piece of code bundled together in order to use it again and again in your projects. Let's see how we can define a function. To define a function, we have to use the keyword def followed by the name of the function, let's say safety, then open and close parenthesis and a semicolon, and hit enter. You can see the indentations, and now we have to write our piece of code after the indentation. So here let's say we will print out a message, please fasten your seatbelt. Whenever we call this function. So we have our function defined. So whenever we call this function safety, we have this message displayed, please fasten your seatbelt. Let's see how we can call this function. So first we will run the cell. To call a function, we just have to write the name of the function followed by open and close parenthesis. Now let's run the code block and see the results. Here you can see that we have our message displayed, please fasten your seatbelt. Now that we have learned how to define a function, it's time to have a quick challenge. In this challenge, you have to add a message, have a nice and comfortable journey. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Let's do it together. So we will just hit enter after this message and then again add a print statement. And here we will write, have a nice and comfortable journey. Now let's run this function and see the results. Here you can see that both of our messages gets printed. Now that we have learned how to define a function, but what if we want to display the message, please fasten your seatbelt, only if the ignition is on? To introduce this functionality, let's learn a new concept of parameters. So parameters is basically a variable which is used to supply some information which can be used inside a function. Let's see how. So we will first introduce a variable. Ignition is on and set its value equal to true. Now we will modify our previous function. So we will write here def safety open and close parenthesis, and inside this open and close parenthesis we have to provide our parameters. So I will provide the parameter ignition is on. So between the open and close parenthesis we have to provide our parameters for the function. Place a semicolon and hit enter. Now we will add a if statement. So I will write here if ignition is on is true, then we will print a message. So I will write here, please fasten your seat belt. Now let's run this code and see the results. So we will call this function safety, pass the parameter ignition is on, and now let's run this set. So you can see that our message gets printed. Please fasten your seat belt. Let's now change the value for variable ignition is on to false. And again run the code. Here it shows nothing as expected. So we have successfully built the functionality for displaying a safety message by introducing parameters inside a function. Now it's time to have a quick challenge to test your understanding. In this challenge, I want you to build a function that displays the safety message when the doors are closed and ignition is on. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Now let's do it together. So I will first make another variable is doors closed and set its value equal to true. Also I will change the value for ignition is on equals to true. Now I will add this parameter is doors closed to our function. So in our function we have two parameters, ignition is on and is doors closed. Now we will accordingly modify our if statement. So I will write here if ignition is on and is doors closed. So if both the conditions are met, then only we will print our message, please fasten your seat belt. Now let's run the code and see the results. Here you can see that our message is printed. Now let's make the value false for one of the parameters. And we will again run the code block and see the results. So here you can see that we get nothing as expected. So our message only gets printed when the values of our both the parameters is equal to true. We have learned how to define the function and the use of parameters inside a function. Till now we are just displaying a message with the help of function. But functions can be used to deliver some values. It might be integer, string, boolean or any other type. These values are known as return values of a function. Let's try to understand it through an example. Here we will modify our previous function to return a string, please fasten your seatbelt, instead of printing it. So here we will modify this by using the return keyword. So now our function returns a string, that is our safety message. Let's run the code and see the results. So here you can see that our message is displayed. Now that we have learned how to use the return statement inside a function, let's test our understanding through a quick challenge. In this challenge, I want you to define a function that return an integer 0 when the doors are open and return an integer 1 when the doors are closed. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Let's do it together. The very first thing that we can do is to make a variable. So we will make a variable is doors closed and let's make this equal to true. Now we will define a function. So we will write the keyword def followed by the name of the function. Here we will write, let's say, closure status. Now we need a parameter. So here we will write is doors closed because we need to return an integer based on the value of this parameter. So let's add this parameter followed by semicolon and press enter. Now we need an if and else statement. So when the doors are open, we will return 0 and 1 when the doors are closed. So we will write if is doors closed, place a semicolon. So if doors are closed, or we can say if this value is true, then we will return 1. Else we will return 0. Now let's use this function and see the results. Here you can see that we get the value 1. Now let's make the value for the variable is doors closed to false and rerun the code block. Here you can see that we get the value 0. We have learned how to define a function, introduced the concept of parameters and returned to apply some sort of logic based on the values of the parameters and deliver an output in the desired format or simply perform certain operations. But what if we can equip the user to provide some input and deliver the results based on his consent or requirements? Well, this can be achieved using the input feature of Python. Using the input feature, we can prompt the user to provide his input. By default, user can provide his input in the form of a string. If we need the input in any other form, we just need to typecast the input. Well, let's try to understand it through some examples. First of all, let's see how we can take a user input. In order to take a user input, we just have to write the name of the variable. Let's say x, then the equal sign, and then we have to write the keyword input. Now put a close parenthesis, and here in the parenthesis we have to provide a message to the user to let him know what kind of input he is expected to provide. So here we will just write, please type a number between 1 to 10. Now let's run the code block and see the results. Here you can see that we get a prompt to provide the input with the message. So we have to type a number between 1 to 10. So here we will write, let's say 2 and press enter. So we have successfully provided our first input. Now let's add a code block and see what this variable x contains. So here we will just write the name of the variable x and run the cell. You can see that we get the value 2, exactly the same that we have provided in the input. Now what if we want the user to provide his name as an input? Well, we can use the exact same way to get the input. So here we will just write the name of the variable, let's say name, then the equal sign and the keyword input, close parenthesis, and here we will provide a message to the user. Please enter your name. We'll also provide a semicolon and a space to improve the readability. Now let's run the code block and see the results. Here you can see that we get the prompt to provide the input. So here the user can provide his name. Let's write the name Nitin and press enter. The user input has been saved in the variable name. Let's add a code block and check the value of the variable name. So here we will write name and run the cell. So you can see that here we get the value Nitin in the variable name. Now that we have learned how to get an input from the user, it's now time to test our understanding through a quick challenge. In this challenge, I want you to define a function to switch the cabin lights of a car on or off based on the user input. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Now let's do it together. So we will first define a function. In this function, we will take the user input as the parameter and we will allow the user to either provide his input in the form of 0 or 1 or in the form of a string. Means he can also write on or off. Based on his input, we will make the cabin lights on or off. So 0 and off are for making the cabin lights off, and 1 and on are for making the cabin lights on. So let's define the function. So we will write here def followed by the function name. Let's say switch cabin lights parenthesis, and here we will provide the parameter user input semicolon and press enter. The very first thing we will do is to convert the user input to a string and make it lowercase. So we will write here user input equals string user input. So using this line, we have converted the user input to a string. In the next line, we will make the string to lowercase. In order to do this, we will use the string function lower. Let's see how. So we will write here user input equals user input dot lower. So we have converted the user input to string and make it lowercase. Now let's build the logic. Here we will use the if and else statement. So we will write here if user input in. Here we will make a list of the similar input so that the if statement will look for the input in the list and make a decision based on it. So here we will write 0 and off. So as we know that 0 and off are the similar inputs and 1 and on are the similar input. So we will make two lists. One for 0 and off and the another for 0 and on. So if user input is in this list, then we will place a semicolon, hit enter, and here we will write cabin light equals off. Now we will add an elif statement for the one or on input in a similar way. So here we will write elif user input in one or on. Then we will place a semicolon and hit enter. Here we will write cabin light equals on. And finally we will add an else statement to handle the scenarios where the user can provide the input other than the desired ones. So we will add an else statement and provide a message invalid input. please provide either on or off. And then we will add a return which returns nothing. Now we have defined a function to switch the cabin lights on or off based on the user input. Now we will add a print statement just to make sure that everything works fine within this function. So here we will write cabin light is, we will add a space here, add a comma, and then here we will write cabin light. Let's now define a variable user input which takes the input from the user and test the function. So we will write here user input equals input. Please enter the status of cabin lights. And finally, we will call the function switch cabin lights, and we will provide the user input as a parameter. Let's run the code block and see the results. Here you can see that we get the prompt for the user input. So we will write, let's say 1 and press enter. You can see that we get the message cabin light is on. Let's again run the code block and this time we will write 0. So you can see that we get the message cabin light is off. Let's now run the code again to test the case of a invalid input. This time let's say we will write none and press enter. You can see that we get the message invalid input. Please provide either on or off. We have learned functions, parameters, return statements, and inputs. We have also learned how we can prompt the user to provide his inputs. What if we want to keep on prompting the user to provide his input until a certain condition is met? Or what if we want to create a loop or execute a bunch of code again and again until a certain condition is met? Well, this can be achieved using the concept of while loop. With the help of while loop, you can run a code again and again as long as the condition is true. Let's try to understand it through an example. So here we will add a code block, and first of all we will make a variable, let's say I, and set its value equal to 1. To add a while loop, we have to write a keyword while. Then we have to provide the condition which the while loop is expected to evaluate and execute the piece of code again and again until the condition holds true. Let's say we have to run the while loop until the value of I is less than 5. So here we will write while I less than 5. Add a semicolon and press enter. Here we have to provide our piece of code. Let's print the value of I until the value is less than 5. So here I will write print I. Next thing we need to do is to make an increment with the value of I. Otherwise the while loop keeps on running forever. So here I will add 1 to the variable I every time the loop runs. So here I will write I equals I plus 1. Let's run the code and see the results. Here you can see that we get the values 1, 2, 3 and 4. You can also use an else statement with the while loop. Let's see how. Here we will extend our previous example with the else statement. So here we will add a else statement, add a semicolon and press enter. Here I will print I is no longer than 5. I is no longer than 5. Let's run the code and see the results. Here you can see that we got the numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4 and we get the message I is no longer than 5. Now that you have learned the concept of while loop, it's time to test our understanding through a quick challenge. So in this challenge, I want you to make a while loop that starts the counting from 10 and loops until the value is less than 5. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Let's do it together. So here I will add a code block and make a variable j and set its value equals to 10. Now I will add a while loop. So I will write here while j is greater than 5, add a semicolon and press enter. Now I will add a print statement. So I will write here print j, and in the next line I will make a decrement for the j. So I will write here j equals to j minus 1. Also I will add an else statement. So I will write here else and add a print statement. So I will write here the value is less than 5. Now let's run the code block and see the results. Here you can see that we get the numbers 10, 9, 8, 7 and 6. And finally we got the message the number is less than 5. Well, this is an exciting journey for us. We have completed our third section and we have learned the concept of functions, how we can define a function, how we can introduce parameters inside a function, use of return statements, how we can take the input from the user, and the use of while loops. Now it's time to apply the things we have learned through a project. In this project, we will try to extend the functionality of our second project by allowing the driver to provide his inputs. We will prompt the driver to take some action, and by the time he fulfills the requirement, he is allowed to put the car into ignition mode. Before going any further, I want you to take it as a challenge and give it a try. So hit pause and take the challenge. Hopefully this went well for you. Let's do it together. First of all, we will define a function that goes through all the checkpoints and returns true if all the checkpoints are met and return false for any other scenario. So let's define a function. So we will write here def followed by the name of the function. So let's give the name all set, and now we will place the variables. So we will write is neutral, then is doors closed, then tire pressure, then fuel level, and finally oil level. Now we will place a semicolon and press enter. Now we will use an if statement and we will check if all the checkpoints are met. So we will write if is neutral equals true. Now to check for another condition, we will use the AND keyword here, and we will write is doors closed equals true, and similarly we will check for the other conditions. So we will write here tire pressure greater than equal to 25 psi and tire pressure less than equal to 35 psi and fuel level greater than equal to 10% and oil level greater than equal to 15%. So we have covered all the checkpoints. Now we will place a semicolon and press enter. Now if all the checkpoints are met simultaneously, we will return true. So here we will write return true, and else we will return false. So by now we have made our function that returns true if all the checkpoints are simultaneously met and returns false for all other cases. Let's now develop a mechanism to prompt the driver so that he can provide his input and meet the checkpoints. In order to do so, we will use a while loop and we will allow this loop to run until all the checkpoints are met. So we will continue running our while loop until our function allSet returns a value equal to false, and as soon as the function returns a value true, our while loop stops running, which means that as soon as all the checkpoints are met, the driver is allowed to put the car into ignition mode. So let's make a while loop. So first of all, we will add all the variables from our previous algorithm, and then we will write while allSet, and we will provide all the parameters from this function. Place a semicolon and hit enter. Now we will start looking for the checkpoints one at a time using the if and else statement. So we will start with the isNeutral checkpoint. So here we will write if isNeutral is true, we will simply pass on to the next checkpoint. Now if the isNeutral is false, we will prompt the driver to change the gear and shift it to neutral. To do this, we will add an else statement. So here we will write else and we will take input from the driver. So we will make a variable change gear and take the input. So we will write here input and then we will write please shift the gear to neutral. So here the driver is expected to provide either true or false. If he provides true as the input, which means that he has shifted the gear to neutral. If he provides false, which means he doesn't shifted the gear to neutral. So we will just check his input by adding a nested if statement. So here we will write if change gear is true, we will consider that the checkpoint isNeutral is met. To convey this information to our function allSet, we will change the value of the variable isNeutral to true. So here we will write isNeutral equals true, and we will print a message print gear shifted good to go. So by now we have covered our first checkpoint. Let's move to the second checkpoint, whether the doors are closed or not. We will look for this checkpoint in a similar manner using the if and else statement. So we will write here if is doors closed, place a semicolon and hit enter. So if this value is true, which means if the doors are closed, we will simply move on to the next checkpoint. In case the doors are open, we will cover that scenario using the else statement. So we will write here else and we will prompt the driver to provide his input. So here we will make a variable close doors equals input, please close the door. Here the driver is expected to provide his input in the form of true or false. Here true means that the driver has closed the doors and false means that the doors are still open. So we will look for the input provided by the driver and check if the doors are closed using a nested if statement. So here we will add an if statement. So I will write here if close doors is true, which means that the doors are closed. Now we will convey this information to our function by updating the value of the variable. So here we will update the value of the variable is doors closed equals true, and we will print a message doors are closed. So now we have covered our second checkpoint. Let's move on to the next checkpoint. Here we will look for the tire pressure. We will use a similar if and else statement to check for the tire pressure. So here we will add an if statement and check if the tire pressure is greater than 25 psi and less than 35 psi. So we will write here if tire pressure is greater than and equal to 25 psi and tire pressure is less than and equal to 35 psi. So if the tire pressure is within this range, we will move on to the next checkpoint. And if the tire pressure is outside this range, we will cover that scenario using the else statement. So we will add an else statement and prompt the user to change the tire pressure. So we will write change tire pressure equals input. Please keep the tire pressure between 25 and 35 psi. Here the driver is expected to provide his input between 25 psi and 35 psi. Let's check the input provided by the driver using a nested if statement. So we will write if change tire pressure is greater than and equal to 25 and change tire pressure is less than and equal to 35. Then we will convey this message to our function by updating the value of the variable. So here we will update the value of the variable tire pressure equals change tire pressure. And we will move on to the next checkpoint. We will add similar if and else statements for checking of the fuel level and oil level. So we will add an if statement. If fuel level is greater than and equal to 10%, then we will move on to the next checkpoint. Else we will prompt the user to add some fuel. So here we will write else and add a variable add fuel equals input. Please add the fuel. Here the driver is expected to provide some positive integer values. So we will check the values and add to the fuel level. Now before adding the input, let's recall the concepts from the input chapter. We know that any input provided from the user is received in the form of a string by default. But we cannot add an string to an integer or we cannot compare an string to an integer. So we will just convert the string to integer using the int function. So now we will add the nested if statement. So I will write here if add fuel, and now I will wrap this variable add fuel inside the int function. So if add fuel is greater than 0, then we will update the fuel level by the added one. So here I will write fuel level equals fuel level plus add fuel. So in this way we will keep on updating the fuel level until it becomes greater than the desired level, means 10%. Now in a similar manner we will check for the oil level. So we will write if oil level is greater than and equal to 15%, then we will pass on to the next checkpoint. Otherwise we will prompt the driver to add some oil. So here I will write else add oil equals input. Please add some oil. And in a similar manner we will update the oil level by the added one using an nested if statement. So I will write here if int add oil is greater than 0, then oil level equals oil level plus add oil. So in this way we will keep on adding the oil until the oil level reaches the safe limit. So by now we have covered all the checkpoints which are mandatory before putting the car into ignition mode. One last thing we need to do is to look after the seat belt and provide a warning message to the driver. To do this, we will add an if and else statement. So if the seat belt is fastened, we will provide a greeting message, and in case the seat belt is not fastened, we will provide a message. So here I will write if is seat belt fastened. If this is true, then we will provide a message print all set, you are good to go. And in case the seat belt is not fastened, we will provide a message using the else statement. So I will write here else and add a message, please fasten your seat belt, and then we will write have a safe and comfortable journey. So we have built a mechanism to go through all the checkpoints and make sure that they are complied. It's now time to test our safety algorithm 2.0. So now let's run the code and see the results. Here you can see that we get nothing. So let's have a look at the code and try to fix the issue. So if we can see at our code, this while loop is not running. So let's have a look at the while loop. So we have written while, we have provided this function all set, and here we have to provide equal false. So if this function returns a value equal to false, then the while loop will run. So let's run the code again and see the results. Here you can see that we get an prompt to provide the input. Please shift the gear to neutral. So here we will write true and press enter. You can see that we get a message gear shifted, good to go. And we get the next prompt to close the doors. Here we will write true and press enter. Here you can see that we get the message doors are closed, and we get the next prompt. Please keep the tire pressure between 25 and 35 psi. So here we will let's say write 30 and we'll press enter. So here you can see that we get an error message. So this is a type error greater than equal to not supported between instances of string and int. So let's have a look at our code. So we can recall from our input chapter that any input we receive from the user is in the form of a string by default. So we need to change this input into an integer in order to have a comparison or in order to have some arithmetic operations on the integer. So here we will convert this variable change tire pressure into integer. So we will wrap this variable inside a function int. So we will write here int, and also we will wrap this inside a function int. Now let's run the code again and see the results. So here we will write true. We can see that we get the message gear shifted, good to go. Now we get the next prompt, please close the door. Here also we will write true and press enter. Now we get the message doors are closed, and we get the next prompt. Please keep the tire pressure between 25 and 35 psi. So let's say we will write here 30 and we'll press enter. So you can see that our code works just fine, and we get the next prompt. Please add some oil. So here we will let's say write 10% and we'll press enter. So here also we get a error message. So here we get a type error. So the message is unsupported operand types plus for float and string. So here also we need to convert this add oil into an integer with the help of an int function. So I will write here int. Also I will edit this add fuel variable also, and I will change it to an integer. So here if you look at the code, we have changed this variable add fuel to an integer for the comparison. But if you look at the next line, we haven't converted this variable which we take as an input from the user into an integer for the arithmetic operations. So this leads to an error. So we need to take care of these things in our code. So let's again run the code and see the results. So here we will write true. Again we will write true. Let's write 30. So now we will add 10% here and press enter. So now we get another error. So let's have a look at the error. So this time also we get the same type error. So this arithmetic operation is not supported between the instances of string and integer. So let's have a look at the code where we had this issue. So let's have a look from the beginning. So here we can see that these are the variables. This is our while loop. This bunch of code is for the checkpoint is neutral. This bunch of code is for the checkpoint is doors closed. This bunch of code is for the checkpoint tire pressure. So this checkpoint has a values in the form of integers. So let's have a close look. So here we can see that we have taken the input from the user. So this variable is in the form of a string. So here in the if statement, we have changed this string into an integer. In the next line, we have assigned this change tire pressure to the tire pressure. But here we missed to change this string into an integer. So that's why we have this error. So we will change this to integer by wrapping this with the int function. Let's now run the code again and see the results. So let's quickly fill this with true. So this is working fine. Again we will write true. The code is working fine up to here. Now we will write please keep the tire pressure between 25 and 35 psi. We will write here 30 and press enter. Now we get the next prompt. Let's write 10 and press enter. Here you can see that we get the final message. Please fasten your seat belt. Have a safe and comfortable journey. And this time our code works just fine. So congratulations, we have just completed our third project and we have successfully built our safety algorithm 2.0. Moreover, it's only a one way to approach toward the solution. You might come up with a different approach. You might come up with different errors during the execution of the code. So preparation of code is an iterative process, means we write some lines of code, then we test our code by running the code block. Sometimes we get everything working in the first run, and sometimes we come up with an error. Then we need to have a look on the error message and try to fix it out, or we need to search it out on the internet or Stack Overflow. And we need to check if someone else have encountered the same error. Then we need to accordingly modify our code and keep on iterating until we get the desired results. So I strongly encourage you to try it out and try to build it using a different approach. We can discuss further in the Q&A section. So we have completed our third section. Good luck.